Hello and welcome to my channel. If this is your first time here, my name is Hannah. So today I'm going to be starting only my second ever reading classics vlog. The first one being the uncensored picture of Dorian Gray like months and months ago, so it's been a while. This one, however, is the deluxe edition of Carmilla by Sheridan Le Fanu. Not sure if I'm pronouncing that right, but it is an Irish name. This actually doesn't come out until September 2nd of this year, but you can read it for free without having to request it or anything. You can just download it and read it on NetGalley from now until August 29th. So fingers crossed I have this up beforehand so this information actually matters. So Carmilla is actually one of those stories I've been wanting to read for quite a while, but my library doesn't have it, surprisingly, so I knew I was gonna have to buy it. But then I saw this on NetGalley and it was just perfect. I can only show the cover by popping it up here, as the e-arc version actually doesn't have a cover or anything. It does have a really cool tidbit of information which I didn't know, and that is Carmilla was originally serialized in the magazine The Dark Blue between 1871 and 1872. I think that's really neat. So, if you don't know, Carmilla is considered the first major vampire story. It predates Dracula by almost 30 years and is pretty much the basis on everything we know and love about vampires today. The story obviously centers around Carmilla. It's a sapphic story and kind of brings in the eroticism and sexiness of vampires that we kind of expect and associate with them. From what I know, this is more of a shorter tale, so I don't think it'll take too long to get through, but I don't have like any page numbers or anything, so I don't know exactly how long this deluxe edition is or what's been added to it or what's different between this and the regular version. Since I don't know too much about this book and I haven't exactly read reviews on it or anything, I don't have any expectations, just that I'm probably gonna enjoy this, as it sounds like stuff I enjoy. So I'm really hoping that it's gonna be a better experience than the picture of Dorian Gray was for me. So let's just jump right into this. So it's only like an hour later, and according to my tablet, I'm already 53% through Carmilla, so this definitely is a shorter story. So this is pretty much how I expected it to be. It's definitely a gothic tale. It takes place in a castle in Austria. We are hearing the story from, oh god, that noise. Anyway, we're hearing the story from the point of view of a 19-year-old girl named Laura, and she's pretty much grown up being isolated in this castle with her dad and her two governesses. Her mom died when she was a little girl, like all that kind of typical stuff. And even though it's from her point of view, she's writing the story and telling it to us 10 years after the events have happened, so she's like just now documenting them kind of thing, and is retelling her story. So Carmilla essentially shows up in a really weird way that I don't exactly understand fully, but on top of that, there's kind of this sickness in the area that seems to be hitting a bunch of the women, and a lot of people are passing away actually. Carmilla herself is described as being very beautiful. She has like this really long, gorgeous, thick hair. She just kind of emanates beauty and grace and is just like this very ethereal creature, essentially. She says a lot of strange things toward Laura that kind of makes Laura wonder what the heck is going on. So a majority of this book has kind of been just little events that have happened between the two of them, conversations, things like that. The setting is very descriptive and I really like it. Usually, well, not usually, but sometimes in gothic stories, things can feel extremely slow to the point of being dull, or things are just too overly described and end up feeling very repetitive. That is not the case here. It all just feels very fluid, and it's actually really easy to read. There are some words that I haven't heard in a while in this, but obviously it was written in the 1800s, so that's why. And it feels very smart in the way it's written as well. So I'm rather enjoying it so far. We even see like the first incident of like a vampire in the first few pages. So it really gets into the story right away. It doesn't really tiptoe around it. And the characters kind of aren't afraid to acknowledge that something weird is going on. But yeah, I'm digging it. It's very good for a classic. Like, I can definitely see why this is a classic. And it is interesting seeing all like the little kind of vampire moments of things that have translated to vampires today. And it's just cool to see where that comes from and how that became such a huge symbol for the vampire. It's now the next day and I am getting some chicken ready to put in the crock pot, so I'm just going to be doing that while talking about the end of Carmilla. So it's another cooler day here, which is why I have a big sweater on, and it's really nice and perfect for reading on the terrace. So I did that this morning and finished Carmilla, and it's a pretty okay story. Like, I enjoyed it. I think it's good, but it's definitely not what I was expecting based on the description. So this story is mainly talking. It's mainly people telling stories of what they've seen, heard, like events that happened, their experiences. So there's not a lot of action, but there's still many scenes of where the people are kind of recollecting what happened to them, and it is very obviously vampires kind of thing. This is a very short book. I think it's less than 200 pages. So there isn't exactly a lot of time to have like this huge build-up. There isn't like a huge climax or anything. The climax of this is literally just like 2 paragraphs long. It's not anything like huge and exciting. And even the revelations the character Laura has, I think it's Laura. Laura or Lauren? I think it's Laura though. Whoa, there's a fly in here. They aren't really like these huge, oh my god, moments. It's more her reflecting on the experience and like realizing what it was, and that it was something more like mystical. And there's a giant fly in here. Get it, Ori. It's super annoying. But her realizing that it's more mystical than natural. The language in this book actually isn't as difficult as I thought it was going to be either. I think I said this before, it's actually pretty easy to read and understand. There are some words that like you don't see very often, but like I knew what they meant, and I didn't have to like look up what the definitions were or anything like that. Also, there's still construction going on, so if you can hear that in the background, I apologize. But I see this story described very often as like this lesbian romance and that it's sexy and stuff like that. But I didn't really get that in this at all. The romance, if you can call it that, is extremely one-sided, and it's kind of essentially how Carmilla entrances her victims. Like, she isn't really seducing them in like a sexual way, but she is like constantly around them, complimenting them, kind of grooming them in a way. And some of the things she says are like really creepy, and like Laura is even kind of just like, I wish she wouldn't say things like this because it's really embarrassing. And it just kind of makes the victims like uncomfortable, and they just don't really understand like what the hell she's blabbering on about. So I really didn't find that romantic or sexy. So I really don't know what people are talking about with that. But I mean, it's kind of the stereotypical thing with vampires where it's like, oh, they're so beautiful, I'm mesmerized by their beauty. It was more like that aspect than anything else, really. One thing I did appreciate is that obviously with something like vampires, like it's this myth, it's like a mythical creature. And so sometimes in stories with vampires, you have the people where it's like, oh no, it can't be this. Like, why are we even like entertaining this idea? This is so stupid, haha, kind of thing. There's none of that in here, and I really, really like that, because I kind of hate where people take so long to accept the truth about something that it like ends up killing someone, or just kind of slows the progress of the story. So I thought that was neat. Since we don't hear the story from Carmilla's perspective, it isn't exactly focused on her, and pretty much all we see her do is just kind of saying these weird things to Laura. Laura has some like visions or weird dreams at night, and that's about it when it comes to Carmilla and like what she actually does. So I thought that was a little surprising, but I was intrigued to see just how much of like the vampire lore and how they act, and like having to sleep in the coffin, like things like that, how many of those things were in this story. It's really just like so much of how we see vampires today, and I thought it might just be like little snippets here and there, but it's really a lot more, and I thought that was really interesting. It's a really good look into seeing how the story of vampires has developed and changed throughout time, or not changed, and like knowing this was even before Dracula, it's really cool seeing the similarities and stuff like that. But it's a quick read. It's not perfect. It's not like, oh my god, amazing, but it's just a really interesting look in the history. And also, this was the deluxe version, but like it was just the story. There was no like introduction, there's no like afterword. I thought maybe there would be something explaining some more of the aspects of the book, but there was none of that. Like, if you are into classics or want to try getting into them, I would definitely recommend this, just because the ease of reading it and how short it is. I literally just read this in 2 settings, could have easily done it in 1. It took me like 2 hours to read, I think it was about, and that was it. So very quick to get through, and I'm definitely glad that I finally got to read it. And I'm also kind of glad I didn't buy it, just because it's so short and isn't exactly what I was expecting it was going to be, but it's still interesting enough where I think I'm going to give it like a 3.5 to 4 stars, just because I really enjoyed seeing the lore and the history of the vampire, which is one of my favorite creatures. I almost forgot, and I just wanted to add, if you read this through NetGalley, it is, like, keep in mind, it's an e-arc, it's an incomplete, like, unfinished copy of the book, and it is very obvious reading it. So the spacing is extremely weird. Oftentimes there's no space between the period and the next sentence, or there might not be a space between a comma and the next word, kind of thing. So that, and punctuation in general, is also a bit strange. The way the paragraphs are built, sometimes there's no spaces, sometimes there's too many spaces. It is very strange, and I'm not sure why it's like that, but I would definitely keep that in mind going into it, because at first I was a little confused by it, and I think it is a little off-putting at times, but I figured I'd give that warning if you give the NetGalley e-arc a try. So thank you for hanging out with me in this short little vlog where not much happened. I was even second guessing, like, filming this part and making it, but why not, huh? So until next time, bonne journée and au revoir.